I try so hard to get through this without laughing. Hello and welcome to Give That Fan a Podcast, hosted by Ryan Blake and Paul Valley. We're the only Orioles show that is this one and not a different one, although there are plenty of others. Thanks for choosing us. You won't regret it. At least, I hope not. That's kind of dumb. Anyway, every episode streams live on our Twitter at Give That Fan a Pod, YouTube at Give That Fan a Podcast, and Facebook.com/Orioles247. Later, you can find audio versions on Apple, Spotify, pretty much wherever you listen to podcasts, as well as at UtahStreetReport.com. Hopefully by now, Ryan and Paul have had enough time to share the live stream on their social media pages, so let's get into the show. I did it! I told Sam I was going to pull him off screen, and then I forgot, but that's okay. Paul and Ryan back with another episode of Give That Fan a Podcast. We are competing with the rubber match at Yankee Stadium on the TV above me. Nothing in the third inning as of now. So not expecting a ton of live viewership, but hopefully we make up for it later on. Sam Dykstra from MLB Pipeline joins us. Sam, thank you for taking the time. How you doing?
Good. Yeah, thanks so much for having me, guys.
Absolutely. So you cover the minor leagues. There's a lot to talk about with the Orioles farm system. We're going to go ahead and dive into it. Paul and I kind of wrote about different people, but we want to start with Jackson Holliday because he's the talk of the Orioles farm right now. He's been absolutely tearing it up over the past 10 days or so with High A Aberdeen. He seems unstoppable. Should we be expecting a promotion to Bowie sooner rather than later? And could we even see him maybe make it to Norfolk by the end of the season?
Yeah, the only thing I'll say about him potentially going to Bowie sooner rather than later is that I think the Orioles are an organization that likes to give their guys ample time at a level, even as hot as he's been. Like I think they want him playing more than the 24 games that he's played so far. That's just kind of been the organization's MO. That being said, I don't think they've ever had anybody who's been on quite this hot streak, right? Like even Adley Rutschman wasn't hitting 405 at a level for as long as Jackson Holliday has at such a young age. I mean, he's 19 years old, for crying out loud. He might be breaking the O's mold. I think it's certainly within the realm of possibility that he could be there maybe by the All-Star break, maybe a little bit later in July. We'll see how the league adjusts back to him. But it's crazy. I mean, it was a big moment for all of us covering the sport when we realized he moved up to High A as quickly as he did. And then to see this run that he's on now, it's really unmatched, at least among current minor leaguers.
With how well he's doing. Sorry, Ryan.
Go ahead. All you.
With how well he's doing, Sam, and the Orioles, we know that they've had the number one overall prospect in baseball the last 2 years. Is he in line to make them the first team in history to have number one overall prospect 3 years in a row, or is that a little far-fetched right now? I mean, right now he's currently number 3. So,
yeah, I mean, it's definitely not far-fetched. I will definitely say that. We're going to do another market corrections at the end of June. I mean, if he's still hitting 405 in June, then we're definitely going to put him at number 1. I think if we voted right now, it would be very close. Because you look at the two guys ahead of him on our list are Jordan Walker, somebody who made his major league debut already this season. That's why we have him there, is that he's already gotten to that level. And Jackson Chourio, who's Jackson Holliday's same age, but has reached AA. But both of those guys don't have the momentum that Holliday does. And, Walker plays a corner outfield spot. Chourio plays center field, but Holliday plays an even more premium position at short. So I think if we were to vote again, Holliday would probably be the leader to be number 1 overall. Things could change between now and then. Like the league could adjust to him. Some freak injury could happen. We'll see. But as things stand right now, I think he would probably have my vote to be the number 1 overall prospect in baseball.
Yeah, Paul, I was going to let you take the next one about Jim Callis was talking to you. I want you to take that one. That's all you, man.
Sure. So I had Jim Callis on. I host another show for Press Box Sports, and he was on our show the past off season, and he was telling me that Jackson Holliday is so good, he expected him to be the Orioles' everyday shortstop by the second half of 2024. The way he's going now, we were expecting him to get up to Bowie, which was Holliday's goal all along for this season, was to make it to AA. Is there a chance that with a great finish to the year to keep the momentum going, and then a great spring training again next year, that he could break with the club out of spring training as their everyday shortstop, especially with how much Jorge Mateo has been scuffling this month?
Yeah, I mean, in a vacuum, I might be more destined to say yes. And I know we're going to touch on a lot of these guys later, but like they have shortstop options, right? Like Jory Ortiz is around, Jordan Westberg is around. There are tons of guys that they should give a lot of rope to at shortstop before Jackson Holiday. Now, I mean, the thing I keep coming back to, talking about how unprecedented this run has been on for him. It kind of reminds me, and I don't like comps all the time, but it's reminding me of what Juan Soto did in the Nats system a few years ago. He kept getting promoted, kept hitting, and then they just promoted him from Double-A to the major leagues. That was a different kind of timeline. They didn't have outfield options ahead of him. He was at that point like the best outfield option for them. So it's not an apples to apples comparison. But the way Jackson Holiday keeps surprising everybody, I wouldn't rule out anything for 2024. I think what is more likely is that, like I said before, he gets called up to Double-A by the All-Star break, probably spends the second half of the season there. Again, as a teenager, that's really exceptional. And is in line for a Triple-A spot going into next year and is pushing Westberg or Ortiz or Mateo, if he's still around, whoever it is, by the first half of next year, but not necessarily opening day.
Sure.
So, Sam, you mentioned Westberg and Ortiz, and we're going to shift gears to those guys here now. Westberg was the organizational minor league player of the year in 2022, and so far this year, he looks even better. About a year or so ago, we were kind of told that he was likely an everyday player at the big league level, that he might hit around 240, be a solid defender who could play just about anywhere in the infield. Has that profile changed, and if so, how?
Yeah, I think you might be a little bit more optimistic now that he can hit better than 240. If you look at some of the data, he's spraying the ball around a lot better now than he ever has. It seems like it was 30% to left, 30% to center, 35 or like 30% to right. Like it, I know that math doesn't quite work out, but you know what I mean. It was about a third to each section of the ballpark, and I think that's only going to benefit him, right? Like that's especially going to Baltimore. The left field wall is further back than it's ever been. An all fields approach is definitely going to help somebody like Jordan Westberg. So I think that's the thing that's benefiting him most right now. Certainly the power is playing even better than some of us thought. I don't think he's necessarily going to be a 30 homer guy, but like the power is showing up early. So I think if anything, he's been an above average hitter, and that's what we expected. But now you feel a little bit more comfortable that he can hit 250 or 260 at the top level.
Is second base? I know he can play second, he can play short, he can play third, he can play corner outfield. But is second base his strongest position?
I would say either second or third because he has enough arm for third, right? It's an interesting mix. If he was in a different organization, we'd probably be talking about him as the future shortstop because he has above average speed, he has enough lateral quickness to handle short, but there's so many other guys around, Jory Ortiz being one of them, that are better defensively that he doesn't need to play that position. So if he's athletic enough, you want to keep him up the middle at second. But he has a strong enough arm that the arm's kind of wasted at second. So maybe you look at him at third, but Gunnar Henderson plays there. So I think he's probably going to be the best fit at second long term just because of where the pieces fall right now. But if he really needed to in a pinch, I think he could play short long enough.
What would you say is Westberg's biggest weakness as a player? Is it that he doesn't have a solidified defensive position at this point? Like kind of like the way, and I know it's a different case, but Ryan Mountcastle coming up through the system, we knew he could hit, but we didn't know where he was going to play. The Orioles have a lot of infielders on their roster, and Ramon Arias will be coming back off the injured list at some point in the near future. Does Westberg fall into that category where he might not have a defined role? And if that's the case, is he more valuable to the Orioles as a trade piece or as part of their immediate future?
Well, I'll take that second part first. I think once you start saying is somebody more valuable as a trade piece, they automatically lose their trade value. Like guys are valuable as trade pieces when they matter to you as an organization, when it actually hurts to trade a guy away. If other organizations know, like, if I take Jordan Westberg away from you, it's not going to hurt as much, then he has less value on the trade market. That's just the way things are going to work. Like it would be great if, people love to come up with trade ideas and it's always our bad players for your good ones. And I'm not saying Jordan Westberg is a bad one, but when you're dealing from a surplus, teams know that, and they're going to want more of your surplus. So in that way, it could kind of hurt the Orioles as deep of a farm system as they have. They may have to pay a bigger price compared to other teams because teams know what they have available. So I don't know if he has more. I wouldn't quite say he has more value as a trade piece. But in terms of like what is his biggest weakness, looking at him right now, it's actually interesting. He has reverse splits. He's hitting righties significantly better than he is lefties. And that's something that I'm sure will like correct itself, but it makes you at least question like, why is that? Why is that happening right now? Because he is hitting righties so well. Why is it the opposite hand that isn't working? That's something I would question if I'm an acquiring club. That's something I would be looking at if I'm the Orioles. But otherwise, everything's kind of there. You just have to find a spot for him. And I wouldn't put him in that Ryan Mountcastle bucket because Ryan Mountcastle was bad defensively. Westberg's not that. He can at least be average. Mountcastle, it's like, we're going to have you play DH, really, if we could. I know he settled in at first, but like he wasn't a good shortstop. He wasn't a good third baseman. He wasn't a great left fielder. Like, you needed to put him somewhere. Westberg is going to earn a spot somewhere, and I think that's a little bit different situation.
So Joey Ortiz now.
Please go.
Is it possible that the Orioles at this point are higher on Joey Ortiz than they are on Westberg? I ask that because Westberg has now accumulated more plate appearances at the AAA level than Adley Rutschman and Gunnar Henderson combined. And I know he's not quite the same prospect pedigree as those two guys, but Ortiz has been given his cup of coffee and is currently on the Orioles 26-man roster. Is that a result of the fact that Ortiz was already on the 40? Do you think it's more of a logistical thing, or do you think there's a legitimate case that the Orioles might like Ortiz a little bit better?
I think there are two reasons for it. One, the big reason is being on the 40-man roster. Like, if you are on the 40-man roster, you have to prove why you're there. Like, if they're overlooking Ortiz to use Westberg, who they have to create a roster spot, then they're not going to know why Ortiz is on that roster to begin with. So give him the at-bats now, give him the opportunities. And if it doesn't work, then you can always turn to Westberg and make that roster move down the line. But if he's already there, you want to utilize his roster spot while you have it. And I think the second thing is Joey Ortiz has an absolutely major league ready glove. Like, that's not a problem. I was there at Yankee Stadium last night, watched him play third base. And he looked like a natural there, which makes sense because of how good he is at short. But when you know you have something that's major league ready, especially the glove, and is something, could take over right away, he can make plays, you're going to want to give that guy opportunities. See how the bat plays. The bat has been pretty good at AAA. I don't think it's necessarily long-term that the O's are higher on him. I think it's just that roster situation and knowing that they could plug at least one aspect of his game directly into the majors and not skip a beat. That's a big deal.
So you've got Jorge Mateo, who was a Fielding Bible Award winner at shortstop last year, yet somehow not a finalist for the Gold Glove. You've got Gunnar Henderson, who's the one overall prospect in baseball, playing third base. Adam Frazier is on a serious hot streak right now, which it's Adam Frazier. But Joey Ortiz, the glove plays. He's got really good bat speed. He's actually been hitting the ball a lot better recently over the last week or so. Is this a guy that should be playing every day at this point? And at what point does Mateo's shortcomings offensively make them say, all right, we're going to put Ortiz out there because we think he can do better offensively, and his glove, while he may not have the same range because nobody has the range of Mateo, his glove is just as good.
Yeah, honestly, I would have made the move already. I've been kind of surprised at how long of a leash they've given Jorge Mateo. I know he's like athletic, like covering the minors as long as I have. I remember him coming up through the Yankee system and everybody just saying, this guy's really fast. He's really athletic. He's going to be good defensively. It's just how much can he hit? But when you have Joey Ortiz, who is a more well-rounded prospect and somebody who I think should be part of whatever this long-term contender they're building in Baltimore, give him the chance now. Like especially with so many other guys coming up behind him. Let him get those at-bats now and prove it. Jorge Mateo's had his time, and that I think he was a valuable piece for them last year. Certainly helped make them a surprise in 2022. But his usefulness has kind of outlived itself, I would say. I would turn the page towards the future. Obviously, that's worked with some of the moves they made last year. Keep that going. But, I'm not around the team every day. It's easy for me to say. But I think Joey Ortiz has certainly earned his chance to be an everyday guy, especially there at short.
And well, Sam, I thought that this move could potentially be coming during spring training. I was talking a lot in the offseason about how Ortiz's glove is ready, and if he can replicate even close numbers he had at AAA last year, especially what he did between Bowie and Norfolk last year after about mid-July, then that's a nice player for the Orioles. And then he got hurt in spring training, and then Mateo got off to such a hot start. And you say, Mateo was really valuable for the Orioles last year. He can still be valuable to the Orioles as a super utility guy. He could be a pinch runner, a defensive replacement. The question is, would he be willing to take on that role after being their starting shortstop for the last year plus?
Yeah, I mean, and that at that point, it comes down to management, right? You have to work with your players. You have to show the guys like, hey, listen, we're in a real spot here. This is not last year where we're just trying to surprise teams. We're legitimately trying to make the playoffs for the first time in a long time. And hey, you see this guy every day. I mean, Mateo, it's not like Joey Ortiz is now a guy at Norfolk. He knows how good Ortiz is. You have to talk him through it. It may suck to have that conversation and try to tell a veteran guy that, hey, you're no longer our starting shortstop. But these are some of the difficult conversations that Brandon Hyde, Michael Elias, all these guys are going to have because it's not going to get any easier. Jordan Westberg's coming up. Colton Cowser's coming up. Like, a lot of these difficult decisions are going to have to be made really soon. And again, you might as well start them early. Like, get these high ceiling guys as much playing time as you can.
Yep. Sam, I want to stay in the infield because there are a few guys who are notable prospects that have kind of fallen by the wayside this year, just in the sense that Orioles fans aren't talking about them as much because of the three guys that we have just gone over. Connor Norby, I want to start with him. He's not hitting for the same amount of power this season so far that he did last year, but he's still having a solid year at AAA. Does he have a path to the Orioles in the immediate future, next year? Is he just flat out blocked at this point? What is his ceiling, and is that going to come on the Orioles major league team?
Yeah, I mean, I think Connor Norby can be a solid regular. He is off to a rough start. I mean, looking at the numbers coming into tonight, I think his ground ball rate was at 44%. And I think that's what's killing his power. He's hitting the ball into the ground. Like, it's tough to get extra base hits. You're not going to get home runs. Like, some of the things that made him a top 100 prospect just haven't really been there early on in AAA, but that's part of the learning process. Not really that worried about it, especially with all these other guys coming up. But looking at where the puzzle pieces are kind of playing, if we're talking about Jordan Westberg at second base, all right, that's Connor Norby's natural position. He's not somebody who can move over to short and third like that. He is a second baseman, or he's an outfielder. It's either second base or left field. And then we're bumping into other guys. So when you kind of look at how the puzzle pieces are shaking out, I kind of see him as somebody who's getting squeezed out a little bit. Maybe he's somebody who you talk to other teams about in trade. But again, it's going to have to be Connor Norby and other stuff because he's a solid regular, and that's good. And he's a top 100 prospect with reason. But he's not going to be the centerpiece of a trade. You need to put some other guys around him to bring in the types of starting pitchers that I think the O's need.
Would you say that Cesar Prieto is kind of in that conversation as well? I know he has a little more defensive versatility than Norby does, but he's kind of flown under the radar, kind of the opposite of Norby, where he didn't have as great of a season last year. He's OPSing 945 with a 376 batting average so far at Bowie this year. Is he kind of in that same conversation where it's, maybe they could find a role for him, but maybe he's part of a trade package?
Yeah, I'm super interested in him because his profile to me smells a lot like.
Oh, did we lose Sam?
Did we lose Sam, or I thought we lost me for a second?
No, I think Sam froze up on us.
Yeah, Sam cut out for a second. Technical difficulties. That's all right. We'll have him back here in a minute. Send him a message if he's struggling. But yeah, good insight so far. We set this up. I didn't realize that the Orioles were playing. I guess I should have looked at the schedule. But looking forward, Paul, if we continue on this Thursday night path, the Orioles' next Thursday night game. Internet cut out, back on in a second. Cool, no problem. So we'll be back with Sam in a moment. The Orioles' next Thursday night game is July 6th, also at Yankee Stadium. So for all of June, if we want to stick with Thursdays, we can certainly do that.
I am out of town next Thursday, though, so you may
so
have
am
to.
No.
Oh well, there you
Show
go.
next week.
No show next week. It is settled. Yeah, I'm interested to see what he has to say about Cesar Prieto, because I was super excited when the Orioles signed him. The hit tool was really good, but the worry was that there wasn't a lot of power. Showing more power last year than we expected, even more power this year. The defensive versatility might have a little bit more than Norby, but I still don't think that it's a ton more versatility. I think his best position would probably be second base. I think that that's more so than anything else, because you have to play him somewhere if you don't want to DH him. I don't know if the arm strength is good enough for him to play third base. I certainly don't think he can play shortstop on a regular basis. So I think it's second or third base. And like we were saying, between between Westberg and Holiday and Ortiz and Henderson, it's like, where's this guy going to play? And you have all these guys. And we already saw them. They traded the middle infield prospect in Darren Ace for Cole Irvin. Hasn't worked out too well because Cole Irvin's in the minor leagues after his first 3 starts, unless you're counting his third of an inning back the other day.
Yeah.
But I think that you're really due to see a couple of these guys that we've already talked about. Them, they might be on the way out. And while we're waiting for Sam, I actually he was talking about how a lot of the fans of every team want to trade their worst players for another team's best players. And it kind of made me chuckle a little bit because we have Sam back here. I'll figure I'll finish the question. We were talking a little bit about Corbin Burns on social media a week or so ago, and somebody was saying he was going to call the Orioles either Grayson Rodriguez and Jackson Holiday or Jackson and Holiday, 2 top 100 prospects, and then a lower level prospect to get a guy who would be nothing more than a year plus rental, unless you agree to an extension. So Sam, I'd like to get your take while we're talking about it. You were talking about how fans of teams always want to trade their worst players for other teams' best players. And I'm wondering if I'm falling into the category of wanting to trade your worst players for other teams' best, because I don't think it should cost the Orioles a Jackson Holiday type of prospect along with 2 top 100 prospects and now a lower level prospect to get somebody like Corbin Burns. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and sorry about that for cutting out, by the way.
Oh, quite all right.
Yeah.
No worries.
You think Wi-Fi would work in 2023, and sometimes it does. But anyways, going back to your question, to get a Corbin Burns, yeah, sure, the Brewers would love to talk Jackson Holiday. I think the interesting thing is with the Orioles system right now, you look at, there's like a little bit of a gulf, right? Like there's Jackson Holiday, there's Grayson Rodriguez, 2 guys we had in our top 10 when we updated. And then you fall down a bit to get to Colton Cowser, and you fall down a bit to get to Jordan Westberg. There's not like those 2 guys in the teens necessarily. Mm-hmm. Like you're not going to they shouldn't give up Jackson Holiday for almost anybody unless like the Padres are going to trade Juan Soto again, something like that, which is not going to happen. It's going to take moving mountains for that to happen, or Ohtani to say, I will come and I will sign an agreement tomorrow. Like I don't think there's a major leaguer out there who's actually going to be available that you would be willing to trade Jackson Holiday for. So at that point, you're talking about like bundling a lot of these guys together. I think you're trying to talk about, not necessarily a Soto trade, but like a Luis Castillo trade of putting Westberg with Cowser, with Kjerstad, and maybe a DL Hall in there too. All these guys who like might be blocked or aren't perfect fits, but if you get 4 of them together, all of a sudden the Brewers system looks a lot better too.
It's fair.
Sam, we're going to talk about a couple outfielders and a couple pitchers, but there's one more guy in the infield. It feels like we've been talking about the infield this whole time. Coby Mayo. The Orioles pipeline has been so good that we have not talked about Coby Mayo hardly at all. He's OPSing .911 at AA. The bat obviously is legit. How has he looked to you defensively? And is a move to first base or corner outfield in the cards for him? Would that be a waste of his great arm? How are we feeling about Mayo's position?
Yeah, I was watching a few clips of him earlier today. He's still somebody who looks a little slow-footed to me at third base, especially coming in on balls. Like he can use the arm well. That's definitely going to be his best defensive asset. So if he's in a position where he has to go to his right, fire across the diamond, those plays are going to work. But he's not somebody who, if you lay down a bunt down the like down the third base line, he's going to charge in and come on very well and get there and make the throw. So, yeah, I think at a certain point you're going to have to talk about him at another position. I want to see him in right, if anything, because of that arm. I mean, we have a 70 grade on it. That's plus plus. I think it would be a little bit of a waste to put him in left. It could certainly work. You still need an arm out there for sure. But I think you put him in right field, you let him get those opportunities and just see what he's like out there because, yeah, he's in Double-A now. Like, it's getting to the point where he's going to bump up against Gunnar Henderson. Why not let him see the grass for a little bit? I know he's been third base only. See how it works out there. Yes, he can still be slow-footed out there, but there's more opportunity. Like, balls in the air, you don't have to be quite as agile for. So I would try him at right field first. If that doesn't hit, then you move him to first. First base should be absolutely the last case scenario.
And is Mayo a guy?
I think it will be.
Sorry, I think we're back and forth a little bit. Is Mayo a guy who could be is his prospect pedigree impacted at all by the Orioles moving the left field wall back about 600 feet, or is that just a myth? Does that really impact the way the Orioles look at him?
It shouldn't, because you still need to play games other places. And with his power, I think it's power that could play anywhere. That, like, he's the type of person who's still going to hit home runs in that ballpark. I don't know how much video you guys have watched of him. He has a really interesting setup at the plate. Like, it's not a leg kick. It's like he brings up the leg very quickly and then just forces it right back down. It almost looks like a fast-forwarded leg kick. It's very funny. But the power certainly plays. And, there's nothing they can do about that wall now. Like, it's unless they're planning to bring it in because they have a right-handed slugger coming up. But if any, that doesn't mean you should avoid right-handed hitters either. Those guys are going to be part of your lineup. So it doesn't affect how I think they should think of him. It might bring his ceiling down from like 35 homers to 30 for fantasy folks, but like they're still going to need right-handed hitters, and he can be one of their best in the system.
So then you look at, and we talk about him potentially moving to corner outfield, and you mentioned right field. I agree. I think his arm plays perfectly in right field. But then you are looking what the Orioles have in the outfield now and what's coming up. And I don't know that you look at Austin Hayes and think, oh, well, we can't have these guys come up because we have Austin Hayes. I think Austin Hayes is incredibly movable. You have Colton Cowser. You have Heston Kjerstad. These guys are both top 5 overall picks in the draft. And then Cedric Mullins looks every bit the all-star player that he was 2 years ago. And even last year, in a bit of a down year, he was still about a 3.5 win player. How does this roster squeeze work out? Do we look at Colton Cowser and Heston Kjerstad as guys who are kind of, untouchables and guys that are going to be part of this Orioles immediate and distant future? Or, if in the right move, they're expendable?
I mean, in the right move, yeah, they are, I guess, expendable. I mean, I think you keep all your prospects, especially the O's, like right now, they've spent all this time building up. You don't make that killer move until you're definitely sure it's going to get you that much closer. So, you look at Kjerstad, you look at Cowser. I don't think they're in a place right now where they need to start freaking out of like, what are we going to do with all these guys? I think you're maybe in that position on the infield. I don't think you're quite there in the outfield yet, although Kjerstad could certainly join that Norfolk club soon. It's going to be very interesting come August. Like, I think one of those guys is going to need to play right. I think Cowser's probably the closest to do that. Again, because he has enough of an arm, I think he would be a little bit of a waste in left. Although I think he plays a really good center, but again, you're not moving Cedric Mullins. But Kjerstad's a step behind him, and Mayo is on the same level as Kjerstad. So it's not a problem yet that needs a solution. And once it does, then you figure it out then. I don't think they're there quite yet, though.
Sure.
Paul, I was going to let you go ahead and take the outfield. You wrote these guys. I'll do the pitchers, and then we'll call it.
Sure. I feel like we're on a delay here, so I keep waiting for you to say something so we don't keep interrupting each other again. So, but yeah, we'll stick with Colton Cowser here. All the guy does is get on base. He moved from 37 in your early season rankings to 29th now. Knock on him was his struggles against left-handed pitching. Last year, slashed 194, 329, 287 against left-handed pitching. This year, that's up to 320, 469. 640. It looks like he's kind of figured it out against left-handed pitching now. He's on the IL right now, but what has changed about his game? Was it just a matter of he was moving to a new level? He's moving up through the system, or is he kind of becoming that more well-rounded, complete player?
I think it just was experience, to be honest with you. I think that sometimes we get lost in this, is that really good players, really good draft picks like Colton Cowser, they just need time. They just need time to figure this stuff out. And sometimes that happens on a little bit different of a trajectory than you think. Not everybody's going to be Jackson Holliday. So the fact that he struggled with left-handed pitching, he knew that all offseason. Like, he knows it is better than anybody. He's the one actually going up against the lefties. So I'm sure it's something that was a point of focus for him going into the spring, going into the regular season. And he's always been a quality hitter. I mean, quality hitters figure this stuff out. So to not reverse those splits, but to even out those splits and get them back to where they were is a reason why we weren't worried coming into the year. I mean, we still had him ranked pretty high in our top 100 rankings. Now we're seeing the Colton Cowser that we think he could be. Now he's somebody knocking on the door. I mean, without that quad injury, I think we would really be talking about, like, when is time? Like, it's got to be happening soon here for Colton Cowser. So I'm really interested to see who he's going to be when he comes back. But he was always too good of a hitter to be thought of as like a potential part of a platoon, I think.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking too. Talked to some people who were saying that his ceiling was a solid everyday player, but not the guy who was drafted 5th overall. And I was like, he's had 1 year,
Right.
But so you're thinking of right now, he's probably major league ready without that injury. Is there anything that he would need to work that you can point out about his game that would suggest that he's not major league ready, aside from the guys who are up at the big league level that are producing and blocking?
I think, honestly, it's just going to be showing that the quad is not an issue coming back. Evening out those splits was the big deal. And that now that is checked off, I mean, the quad is a problem because he is an athletic player. He's an athletic outfielder. Like I said before, I think he could be a center fielder if Cedric Mullins wasn't there. So he's going to need to prove that athleticism. That's going to take some time. I mean, we have Drew Jones in the Arizona Diamondback system, who's currently out with a quad injury. He's been out for a few weeks now. I mean, sometimes this stuff takes time. So I think that's going to be the big thing for him, is not only just coming back from the injury, but showing that his athleticism is fully back. Once that happens, I think you have the conversation within like 2 weeks of him coming off the IL.
Yeah, and then you look at a guy like Heston Kjerstad, number two overall pick in 2020, had the battle with myocarditis, finally gets back on the field for the first time in roughly 2 years, and then tears his hamstring on like the first day of spring training, and then he's out 12 weeks. He got off to a slow start last year, but then really started coming on, especially at high A in the towards the end of the year and in the playoffs. Goes to the Arizona Fall League, tears that up, wins the MVP of that league, tears up spring training. He's tearing up Double A. I think his promotion to AAA is imminent. What kind of player are we looking at here? The strikeout rate is down. The walk rate is up. The power is obviously there. The Orioles drafted him because they said he's the best left-handed prep hitter prep amateur hitter in the country. Is he going to live up to those expectations?
Yeah, I mean, those were lofty expectations that they put on him at the time. I don't know if he's ever going to quite live up to that. We'll see how that draft class kind of holds up. But it was really amazing to see him last year in the Arizona Fall League, because that was a hitter's league. You always kind of have to check yourself when a guy gets off to a really good start there and sustains it for the 6 weeks. But we were looking at ourselves and just being like, this is the Arkansas version of Heston Kjerstad. Like, this is who we were told he would be as a pro. And it's just taken some time. Obviously, coming off the heart issue is not easy for anybody. And then you miss the additional time. He just needed the at-bats. So even if it wasn't there in high A, he just hit the right time. He was somebody who really needed that AFL. So to see him carry that forward to the spring, I interviewed him down in Sarasota. And I kind of joked with him. I'm like, you have a swing that's made for Utah. You realize that? I'm like, how much are you going to be aiming for that street and to get a plaque out there someday? He's like, I don't want to say you aim for home runs. And I'm like, but you kind of are, aren't you? And he just kind of gave me a wink. I think he has the perfect swing for that ballpark, really. I mean, he's somebody who's just going to be aiming for the warehouse over and over and over again. Again, he's a prototypical right fielder. Colton Cowser, somebody who can move around a bit. As Kjerstad kind of has to be in right. Then again, we're talking about him bumping up against Kobe Mayo if that's the route they go that way. He has to be in a corner outfield spot. But, man, the swing is back. It's got the perfect uphill nature to it. It's designed to drive the ball. He has the raw power to back it up. I'm really excited that he's gotten off to another great start because it's been such a tough start to his career.
Yeah.
Sam, we've talked about a lot of exciting hitters. I want to talk about two left-handed pitchers. The first being DL Hall. He's currently at number 5 on the Orioles prospect list. Seems to be trending down a little bit based on his performance so far in 2023. I don't know if that's fair to say, but that's the impression that Orioles fans seem to have at this point. In his Major League cup of coffee that he's gotten so far, split between last year and this year, a 206 FIP in 16 2/3 innings with 26 strikeouts. You obviously like those numbers. We've seen some really good and some really bad from him this year at AAA. Is DL Hall still an elite pitching prospect, or is it more of a you hope he might be a good 3 or 4 at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's almost optimistic to think he could be a 4. And I hate saying that. I think he could be like an elite reliever. I really do. But if it's me, I start talking about ripping that cord and just put him in the bullpen and let him fly out there. Make it kind of like a 3-headed monster that they got out in the bullpen. Him from the left side, the other 2 guys from the right. Because, the walks are just like the prototypical DL Hall start is 5 innings pitched, 2 hits, no runs, 4 walks, and 7 strikeouts. It just seems to happen over and over and over. And it's like a great line. And you think like, great, he gave up no runs, but like those walks are going to hit him at some point. And there's a reason why he hasn't stuck in the majors yet. Every time I talk to somebody about the Orioles, I say like, hey, when do you have that conversation? They're like, we still think he's a starter. And I get it. He's got the pitches for it, but he just isn't getting chased outside the zone all the time. He's not always filling the zone either. And that's going to bite you. And let him cook in the 7th and 8th inning, I would say. Maybe you do something like the Brewers did with Brandon Woodruff and Corbin Burns. Those guys started out their careers in the bullpen and eventually morphed into major league starters again. But it's getting to the point where, he needs major league time. And I think that's going to come in the bullpen.
See, I am like the president of the DL Hall fan club. I love DL Hall, and I think that if he can hone his command, he could be an elite starting pitcher. And it bums me out so hard, Sam, that he just can't seem to figure out the command. And now it looks like his velocity's been down recently. He went on his last start and got absolutely drilled. Have you noticed anything about his velocity? Do you think it's something with fatigue, or is it more so he's throwing with not as much velocity to try and gain more command?
Yeah, I think that might be part of it. Following the last couple starts, now that AAA StatCast data is available, it stands out to me that you start to see more 93s, 94s than like the 97, 98s that we used to see from DL Hall. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if that's part of it, of just like, hey, if you're going to be a starter, the breaking pitches work, the changeup works. You don't need the blazing fastball, but make sure you can throw it for a strike. And maybe that allows you to take a little bit off of it. Because the other concern would be an injury. Like that's usually what immediately comes to mind is a guy losing 3 to 4 miles an hour off his fastball, but they keep trotting him out there and keep getting him innings. So I think that's the part of it. But again, just let him be who he is at his best. And that's somebody with a 97, 98 mile an hour fastball, with a really good slider, with a really good changeup, with a really good curveball. And if he walks 1 or 2 guys in the bullpen, it's not the end of the world. But if he walks 4 or 5 guys in a start, then that's really a problem. So I hear you. I would love for him to be a starter, but we can't keep playing this game of if he does this, because he's had his chances now. Like we're in year 4 or 5 of doing this. Is if he does it, the rubber's hitting the road. I think on DL Hall.
Yeah. It breaks my heart as well because I also love DL Hall. I think I just have a little bit of PTSD from the Kevin Gausman, Dylan Bundy, Jake Arrieta. This whole thing about the Orioles struggling to develop pitching. But I want to shift gears to the other left-handed pitcher that's in the Orioles top 30, or one of the other left-handed pitchers, and that's Cade Povich. He has 55 strikeouts in 35 2/3 innings at AA this year. With Grayson graduating from the Orioles prospect list at this point, having exhausted eligibility, is Cade Povich the best starting pitching prospect in the organization, or is he still behind DL Hall? And how does potential move to the bullpen for DL Hall impact his ranking as a prospect if there's still the potential that he could be an elite reliever?
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating to think about because relievers now have more value, I think, than they ever have, because their short starting pitchers have less value than they ever have. So if you have a guy who can throw really 2 great innings out of the bullpen, that's pretty valuable. That's great to have nowadays. I think it's tough to keep those guys in the top 100. And when we do the market corrections, like, we're going to have a serious conversation about DL Hall. If he hasn't graduated by then, maybe he'll graduate and make the conversation easy on us. I would still probably have him above Cade Povich just because of the ceiling. Like, if it works, and again, there's that word, if it works, I mean, he's at least a number 3. But whereas Cade Povich kind of falls into that group, and the Orioles have a lot of these guys where if it works, they're number 5. I mean, he's got a good changeup. The control numbers have actually taken a step back this year, but we thought they were above average coming into the year. There just isn't like the special stuff there is with Grayson or DL. So, if you're catching me on a technicality, and again, I think DL Hall is best as a reliever, then yes, Cade Povich is the best starting pitching prospect in the system. Is he the best pitching prospect in the system? I'll still give that to DL Hall, I think.
And last thing, while we're still on pitching, it's obvious that the Orioles farm is deeper in position players than it is in pitchers. Of names that are further down the list, and they can be on the top 30, they can be, even lower than that. Are there any that you think have a chance to make a legitimate climb in the rankings? And if so, do you have a name or two you can throw at us?
Yeah, I mean, somebody who I think we might talk about as a top 100 guy maybe by the end of the year is Samuel Basallo, a catcher, super young, 18 years old, already at single A. He's really bat first. He's not a great catcher at this stage, and I think there's going to be a point in which the Orioles have to figure that out. He's played a decent amount of first base so far at single A, but the way he's performing at 18 years old has been really special. And then he was somebody already on our list of like, keep an eye on this one, because the Orioles keep developing hitters, and he has those tendencies that seem to really plug well into the system. He could be the next one to pop. Now he's handling single A really well. All right, that's great, but he needs the catching to catch up to the offense. Are they going to allow that to happen? Are they going to keep him in Delmarva all year, or are they going to move him up to high A Aberdeen to get that test to make sure he's not hitting like 350 come July and not getting tested offensively? That's going to be a fascinating thing to watch. But at this point, he's hitting well enough where if he can stick at catcher, he's going to be a top 100 prospect probably by the end of the year.
That's exciting. And with the graduations of a few of the guys near the top of the Orioles list, Basallo's number 10 on MLB Pipeline right now. So that's encouraging to see. And an exciting young player having a good year. He's definitely a name to watch. He was an international signing, right? 18 years old. There are a cluster of international signings that Pipeline has ranked between 20 and 30 on the Orioles farm. Of those names, who has the best chance, would in your estimation, in the next couple of years, to be talked about the same way Orioles fans are currently talking about Holiday, Westberg, Ortiz, Norby? Which one of those names do you see making a jump?
I mean, it's tough to think about that, like, because those guys entered with so much hype. Like Jackson Holiday, obviously coming through the draft, immediately got plugged into our top 3 among Orioles guys. So talking about guys in 20 to 30, if we were that big a believer in them, we would have ranked them higher as they kind of signed. But you look at somebody maybe like Luis Almeida, who has above average power, a good arm. If everything kind of comes together, maybe he could be that guy. Braylon Tavera, somebody who's athletic plus speed, has some decent pop at 18 years old. The bat's going to come around, but if it does, he's athletic enough that maybe he's kind of in that Colton Cowser group eventually. I have more questions about him offensively, but it's encouraging to have guys like Basallo and like Prito, who we were beginning to talk about before I got cut off, because the O's didn't used to do this. I mean, they just did not sign international guys for big money, and they decided that's just not a thing we're going to pursue. And I'm really grateful that they've changed that, because it changes the diversity of the system for one, but it strengthens the system. Like, you're cutting yourself off to a major market of potential talent. So Basallo could be the face of that, I think, pretty soon, if he isn't already.
I'm glad the first name you brought up was Luis Almeida because I had him on the show last week, and he was an absolute pleasure to talk to. All right, we're at about 45 minutes here. I want to end this with a little bit of a game of sorts, if you're down for it. I know Orioles are up 1-0, top of the sixth. Gunnar Henderson just stole second base. So we're gonna go ahead and wrap this up with that game. I'm gonna mention, or I'll list a tool or a characteristic of a player. And Sam, if you would, I'd like you to tell me which Orioles prospect leads the way in that category. And it can be a guy from the top 30. It can be a guy further down the list. You want to play? You want to have some fun?
Yeah, let's do it.
I might be able to save you some time if we just say for all these offensive things, Jackson Holiday.
I didn't write. I have some answers written down already. I didn't put Holiday for everything. I put him for a lot of things, but I didn't put him down for everything. So,
all right. Well, then let's start with the hitters. Let's start with keeping it simple, the hit tool.
I mean, yeah, that's Jackson Holiday that I have down for. I mean, you don't hit 400 like he is right now at high A by accident. And, this kind of bleeds into one of the other things we'll talk about. Like the plate discipline is incredible. He's not just somebody who's free swinging up there and, getting to 400 through batting average on balls and play. He's spraying it around. He's making good swing decisions. He's the closest I feel to anybody in the system who could hit 300 at the major leagues pretty consistently.
Good stuff. What about raw power and then game power?
So raw power, I'll go with Kobe Mayo. Just guy's built like a house. When he's going to swing with his A swing, the ball is going to go a long way. So I'll go with Kobe Mayo for raw power. In-game power, I'll go with Kjerstad. Again, because that swing is just so designed to lift on contact. And he has the strength behind it too. So I'd be really interested to see how those two are going to kind of compare by the time they make the major leagues, like who's going to end with more home runs. But I think in terms of how it plays right now, Kjerstad has the upper hand for actual in-game power.
Okay. Overall defense.
Defense, I'll go with Joey Ortiz. I mean, we talked about him before. He's got a slick glove, just makes all the natural movements really well. I don't know if I would put like Gold Glove style on him. Maybe he could reach that someday, but just makes all the plays both at short and third. Not an easy thing to do, and a very valuable guy to have in your system and already on the major league team.
That's certainly an answer I expected for defense there. How about throwing arm?
Throwing arm, Mayo. Again, he's, you look at our top 30, he's the only one to get a 70 grade on the arm, and that's why I think he would be wasted at first base. Like, yes, his size and his actions speak to first base, but when you have somebody who throws it as hard as he can, like, give him a chance to air it out whenever you can.
How do you rate Joey Ortiz's arm? Because I never saw the rating for his arm, and I've been watching him at third base, and every throw is to the chest on a line. And we've been watching Gunnar struggle even in today's game against the Yankees. We've been watching him struggle get the ball across the diamond despite his arm strength. Is Ortiz's arm that good?
I mean, we have it right now as a 55, so that's above average, which is good. Like that, and I think sometimes we get lost, especially in today's game, with like the Mason Winns of the world for people who follow prospects, or the O'Neill Cruzes, guys who can throw like 99. What you need is to get it there. You need to get it there where it's not bouncing, where you don't have the first baseman who has to make a play. So I think Joey Ortiz has that type of arm strength where, like you said, he's going to hit you in the chest. It may not pop necessarily on StatCast the same way, but if it's consistent and it's always in the same place, that speaks to arm strength too.
All right. Speed, or I guess you guys call it running.
Yeah, so the run tool or speed, however you want to put it. Luis Valdez, not in our top 30, but we put together a list of the fastest prospects for each system, I think a month or two ago. And Jonathan Mayo, who does the Orioles system for us, he came up with Luis Valdez, somebody who stole 71 bags last year, has another 20-plus stolen bases this year, hasn't been caught yet, I think, coming into tonight, which is, obviously really good. He has an OPS that begins with 4, so the bat's really not playing. But guys like that sometimes kind of carve out a career. Like you look at like Quentin Berry, somebody who just consistently gets brought in to postseason contenders as somebody who can run. And now with the rules changes, speed has more value than ever. So Luis Valdez may not crack our top 30 ever because of the bat, but like the wheels could work, and I'm going to be really fascinated to see what's next for him.
It's Orioles legend Quentin Berry. Plate discipline.
Yeah, that's Jackson Holiday again. Just because, again, somebody who can walk more than he strike out everywhere he's gone. He has not been challenged in that way yet. He really understands the zone. Shouldn't be a huge surprise given his pedigree, given he's been around the game all his life. I'm sure he was getting at bats at 2 years old and learning what was a ball and a strike then. But it's been really impressive to see him continue this as he's gone higher.
And then lastly for hitters, something that you can't quantify, but I'm just curious of the people you've been able to talk to or get to know. How about makeup?
Yeah, I meant to bring this up. I think makeup sometimes people search too hard on makeup. Like you can't really ever know a player's makeup unless you're around them all the time. Even if I were to say, like, I've had good interviews with Heston Kjerstad, I've had good chats with Grayson Rodriguez and DL Hall. Like a lot of these guys that we're talking about are really good guys. Colton Cowser had great personality on social media for the Orioles this spring. They seem to have drafted really good guys, but like I can't speak to who has the best of it, who has the worst of it. I don't see what these guys are like in the locker room. Makeup's always kind of hard for me to judge. That's why I usually, in my personal evaluations of guys, try to keep it to what I can see all the time. That's the stuff on the field.
So you don't know who had a birthday party and none of their teammates showed up?
Yeah, I can't say I did. No, that is not something that is always shared. Sometimes you'll hear whispers of like, hey, so-and-so is kind of a jerk or isn't taking to instruction or stuff like that. But it's like anything else. You got to consider the source. Like, why am I hearing this? Why is somebody trying to lead me down that path? And what are they trying to get out of telling me that? So makeup is something I always find a little bit hairy to judge.
All right, let's head over to pitching. Fastball velocity and then fastball life, if you can differentiate those two.
Yeah, this is a little bit cheating, and I know Grayson Rodriguez has already graduated, but I'm going to put him for fastball velo just because I don't think anybody who is in that system still, like because of what DL Hall, we've seen him lose a few ticks. I don't think anybody's touching what Grayson Rodriguez can be. Now, it's been really interesting to watch him in the majors because I think the fastball is getting hit. There might be some questions of like him tipping pitches. Sounds like he's been working on his delivery out of the stretch because he thinks that might be an issue, that people know the fastball is coming. But I think on its day, I mean, I remember seeing him pitch in Hartford when he was with Bowie, and he was touching 100 back then. And I know he's not doing that as much anymore, but like the velo is still there. It's a really good fastball. And I think that's the key to making him a potential ace in the majors. But as for like fastball life, I think DL Hall might have him there a little bit just because of the angle. It's really flat. It's why it works. Guys kind of find it difficult to pick up sometimes. And by flat, I mean it almost has like rise to it that we talk about now in the carry with the fastball. That's a big reason why DL Hall can be effective, even if he is losing a few miles an hour.
Okay, breaking ball.
Breaking ball, I'm going to keep it with Hall and his slider. I think, again, just to keep it within guys who are in the system. That slider, it's almost like a sweeper. It sweeps really well across the zone. And if you're sitting there on the heater thinking like it's going to come up and in, and then all of a sudden it's pitching, the pitch is ending up by your knees and on the outside corner for lefties, that's really tough. And it's another reason why they keep hoping that DL Hall becomes a starter because he has the breaking pitches, and they might be the best in the system.
And then how about changeup? Or I don't know if anybody in the system throws a splitter or some other kind of off speed, but changeup.
Yeah, changeup. I'll go back to Grayson Rodriguez. That is something that he's learned in pro ball and is now taken to the major leagues. I don't think it's quite acting the same way in the majors that it was in the minors, but it was a legit plus pitch. I mean, it was a big reason why he took off the way he did 2 years ago and then was knocking on the door last year. It's a special changeup. Even if like the metrics on it aren't great, you look at how hitters are performing against in the majors, and they can't hit it either. So I think once he figures it out, it's going to get even better. But it's already at least a plus pitch, I think.
Okay. Control and command.
Command, I will go with Povich. I know the walks aren't necessarily there, but that's a big thing for him, like why we have him ranked as highly as we do, because there might not be a plus pitch in the bunch, but like he can usually hit his spots pretty well. And I think that's going to be a big reason why if he's ever going to make it to be a number 4 starter, he's going to need to hit his spots. So I'll take him for command. This guy's not really a prospect anymore. He's not a prospect, I should say. But I just wanted to bring him up for control because I was looking through some of the numbers. Cole Irvin has a 2.8% walk rate in the O system.
Cool. Sure.
I mean, it's kind of insane. It's also like, I know he doesn't have the stuff. Like, that's why he's not in the majors right now. He doesn't walk guys, but like major leaguers are going to punish him. But still, when you look at control, I don't think there's that guy in the system anymore who's like a 60 control. So I just kind of want to bring up that fun fact about Cole Irvin because that's insane. Walk rate below 3 is incredible.
Does that trade look bad for the Orioles? If you look back on it, Darrell Hernandez for Cole Irvin, who, a 3.98 ERA at the big league level, 180 innings pitched last year, and then this year he spent most of the year down at AAA, and they don't know that they can trust him. How does that trade look now in hindsight?
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna have to see who Hernandez is because I think at a certain point, any major league production, like if you have a trade and you're the team that gets major league production and the other team doesn't, then you win, even if it's like frustrating major league production. That being said, Hernandez, I think, is somebody who I'm hearing more and more about. Like, he could be pretty good eventually. It's going to be years before we really find out. But, like, I don't think it's worked out quite the way those have, but there's still hope that you look back on it and like, all right, well, we gave up a lottery ticket and it didn't work. And if nothing else, we got some major league innings, which are always valuable.
Sure.
And then last thing for pitchers, I know you already talked about how DL Hall has kind of a funky angle that makes it difficult for opposing hitters, but I'm curious who you think has the best deception.
Yeah, I mean, I had Hall for that too. I just think going back to that classic Hall line that I was talking about before, he doesn't give up hits and he gets a lot of strikeouts because guys just don't know where the ball's coming from. It's really hard to pick out. He's not overpowering on the mound. He's not as tall as Grayson Rodriguez. I mean, he's not 6'5", but the way he hides the ball really works. The way the ball comes out of the hand, it can be really difficult to pick up. The way the pitches tunnel off each other, all of that speaks to deception, and all speaks why we all want to believe in him. It's just hitting those spots.
All right. Well, Sam Dykstra, MLB.com, MLB Pipeline. Thank you so much for taking the time. Is there anything you want to plug coming soon for you?
Not directly. I mean, I co-host the Show Before the Show podcast, the official podcast of Minor League Baseball with Benjamin Hill and Tyler Mon. That comes out every Friday. So new episode will be dropping tomorrow for that. Otherwise, just keep them peeled on MLB.com/pipeline. I mean, we're always updating our lists as guys graduate. There's a certain player who we've talked about here tonight. I'm not going to say who is joining our top 100 soon. You could probably figure it out. So we're always updating those lists as guys come off. So check back on the rankings pages, but those ranking pages are also great. They also have tons of stats. They have all sorts of video. They have any type of news involving prospects. So that's what I would plug, is just always check our stuff on MLB Pipeline.
Great stuff. Well, Sam, thank you again for joining us. We very much appreciate the time. We'll let you go. Paul and I will wrap up, and you enjoy the rest of your night.
All right. Thanks so much for having me, guys.
This was awesome. Thanks, man.
All right.
So I'm starting to wonder. That was awesome. That was awesome. Getting to talk to guys who prospects are what they do. Getting to talk to those analysts, especially as you're starting to get inch closer and closer towards the draft. It's just so much fun. There's so much intel, and it gives you so much to look forward to just about the Orioles system. He's talking about DL Hall, and it's like, who has the best fastball movement? DL Hall. Who has the best curveball? DL Hall. Who has the best deception? DL Hall. He's a late inning reliever. You know what I mean? And it's like, well, maybe if he starts tipping his pitches, maybe they're not swinging because they have no idea where the ball is going, so their best chance is to not swing. But if they know what's coming and they still can't hit it, maybe they'll start swinging more because they think they know what's coming. I figured out DL Hall. Just have him tell them what he's throwing and see if they can hit. That's how you figure him out.
I love it.
Zach Greinke
I love
style.
it very much. Sure, yeah. Just have him signal whatever he's throwing, and then maybe they'll see. All right, Paul. The Orioles are playing the Yankees. It is 1-0 in the top of the 7th. Ryan McKenna grounded into an inning-ending double play with a runner on third base to end the 6th. Kyle Gibson is through 6. He's allowed 1 hit, 4 walks, 2 strikeouts, no earned runs. He's at 84, I think, pitches. Adam Frazier at the plate, 1 out, top of the 7th.
Kyle Gibson, right before his last start, it was on a Friday, and the Orioles desperately needed him to go deep into the game. And it was against the Blue Jays, and he started out slow. He didn't look like he had his best stuff. And I'm putting in my notes for the show, Kyle Gibson, is he just this year's version of Jordan Lyles? Is he one of those guys where it's like the Orioles want to take the next step? They need somebody to replace him as the guy in the rotation. Like they signed him to be the veteran presence, to be the guy who you can depend on to get you the innings and keep you in ball games. Does that guy now need to be somebody who's a legitimate ace? And then he goes out and he gives the Orioles 7 innings of 1-run ball. And then tonight, he's given them 6 innings of 1-hit ball, and it's just like, man, just when I think I'm out, they bring me back in. It's he's having himself a game tonight.
He is. Well, Paul, the last 3 Orioles victories have been their best wins of the year, and I don't know if you can order them, but the last 2 wins in Toronto and then their victory last night against the Yankees all felt like the win of the season.
Mm-hmm.
It's a fun ride right now. We talked on our last show that was just the 2 of us about how if the Orioles can go 11-11 in this stretch of games against what we called the gauntlet, that would be thrilling. Well, they've already won 11. They're trying to get their 12th tonight, and they have 3 more games left in that gauntlet as the Rangers come to town this weekend. It's exciting, man. But I want to get off here. I want to watch the end of this game.
Yeah.
Frazier might have just beat out a ground ball. Yeah, Frazier's on first with 1 out. Let's get a little bit of insurance. Give it to Yenny or Cano. I don't know if we have Bautista tonight because he's thrown the last 2 nights, so probably not. So maybe
I bet Cano's probably in the closer's role tonight. You probably have Baker for the 8th inning, I would imagine. I don't think that Givens is in line to pitch tonight, so I'm thinking that you're looking at, man, that's the second time a pitcher has dropped a ball. I'm watching on the Mass Nap up in my office.
Oh, so you're like 7 minutes behind.
Yeah, so Adam Frazier literally just reached base on Cordero dropping a throw over. I think that's the second time he's done that in this game. So, but yeah, I lost my train of thought.
The Orioles are good, man. The Orioles are a lot of fun right now.
The Orioles are a good baseball team. Oh, right. So I think that we all said that 19-9 was a pipe dream for the first month of the season, but that they could do it if the cards fell right, and that's what they did. And then it was like I looked at the schedule at the beginning of the year, and I'm like, all right, 19-9 the first month. Then if they go 500 in June, and then they have 500 in May, and then they have a soft schedule in June, and then they go 500 in August, they'll be right in the thick of it. Well, they went 19-9 in the first month, and in May they have a real opportunity to be another 4 or 5 games, maybe even 6 or 7 games above 500 this month. They're good, man. Get used to it. It's awesome.
I said yesterday on Twitter, like these games, it's not a test for the Orioles anymore. It's a test for everyone else.
Yeah,
the Orioles
100%. Can you beat the Orioles because they beat everybody? It's awesome.
Oh yeah. All right. Before we go, this is an exciting personal night for me. I tweeted this a little bit before the game. Ryan Mountcastle, Ryan McKenna, Ryan O'Hearn, all in the Orioles starting lineup tonight. It is the first time in Baltimore Orioles history, and if my research was correct, the first time in American League history in which there are 3 Ryans in the starting lineup. So I'm wearing my Mountcastle jersey, which just came in the mail the other night, which I ordered from the team store on April 11th when he had 9 ribbies against the Athletics. Finally got it. It's on my back tonight. I'm celebrating something. Maybe it's a replay. It's a replay. Anyway, thank you as always to Derek and Tony at Utah Street Report for hosting the podcast. If you or someone you know is struggling with substance abuse, you can call the national hotline at 1-800-662-4357. That's 1-800-662-4357. Fentanyl crisis is real. Chances are you or someone you know has been impacted by it, and a simple phone call can save a life. Thank you to Sam Dykstra for joining the show tonight. Thank you, Paul, as always, for doing this with me. I already said thank you to Derek and Tony. I still haven't created an outro video, so we will see you next time on not this week, not next week, because Paul and I are both away, but the week after. We'll see you in June, and the Orioles may be in first place by then. See you next time.
Week's June too, though.
That's true. Well, maybe by next show we'll have a couple games up on the Rays. We'll see. They're hot right now. All right, man.